Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Delicious things to eat. Popcorn can be beat. Sparkling drinks such as dandy. Chocolate bars and candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, Hesse. Hello, listeners. Welcome back to this bonus surprise episode of Movie Mindset.
Surprise.
Hesse, it's been quite a summer at the movies. How was your summer at the cinema been so far?
My summer at the cinema has been fantastic. I saw Barbie, obviously. I haven't seen Oppenheimer quite yet because it's hard to find tickets for the IMAX 70mm screenings.
So you'll accept nothing less than the full 70mm IMAX eardrum splitting Oppenheimer experience.
I have heard from some of my sources that the 70mm print is better than the IMAX because all the shots that aren't shot in IMAX get blown up in the IMAX print from 70mm, which makes things look weird. But yeah, I'm still trying to see it on the biggest screen possible. I mean, fuck it, we ball, you know. I'm trying to blow my own mind.
Well, I have yet to see Barbie. I have seen Oppenheimer and thought it was great. And this is my way of introducing this episode, of saying, I know we promised a Barbieheimer summer movie episode of this show, and this has been an amazing summer for movies. It's been BO for Hollywood. But of course, this is all happening at a time when people feel really energized to go back to the movies, dress up and go to movies. And when, two summer releases are like big cultural events, and at least as far as Oppenheimer is actually a very good, serious movie. That being said, we are not doing Barbie and Oppenheimer for our bonus summer movie mindset episode because I support the SAG and WGA strike, and also I don't want people getting mad at me.
Yeah, same.
Now, listener, keep in mind, if you are listening to this episode of Movie Mindset, you have already wittingly or unwittingly entered into a contract to never get mad at Hesse or myself. Mm-hmm. So if you're mad that we're not doing Barbie Oppenheimer, or that we were maybe considering doing Barbie Oppenheimer, you are in violation of your contract with Movie Mindset. So
we need to take a step back, or we can take legal action against you.
This is not to say I still really want to do a Barbie and Oppenheimer episode. I have tons of thoughts on Oppenheimer, and I'm sure plenty once I see Barbie. But, it's just, this is a gray area here, and, our status as movie influencers, it's a gray area, but I don't want to trot on anyone's toes by, it's a gray area as to what constitutes promoting a current release Hollywood movie while this strike is going on. So I'm just not gonna touch that live wire right now. Just all solidarity to the WGA and SAG.
I just want to clarify. I'm solidarity with the WGA SAG. I don't give a shit. Rotten hell. I'm kidding.
When will these greedy actors just get back to work so we can start talking about movies? We saw Asteroid City. Great. Had a great time in that. Really fun. I saw Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Possibly the dumbest entry in the franchise yet, but still had a great time seeing that movie. I've got plenty of thoughts to spare, but we're going to put a pin in that for now, dear listener, and just bring you actually like a report from Hesse and I's summer at the cinema, because today's episode is inspired by our recent trip to the sort of the mothership of Movie Mindset, the Roxy Hotel and Cinema here in New York City. And shout outs to our friend Nick Newman for helping to present a 35mm screening of Howard Hawks's 1959 Western Rio Bravo that we attended over the weekend. And this was pure kismet because Catherine and I bought tickets to the showing of Rio Bravo on Sunday evening. We picked out our seats in the theater, and then who comes who like the doors on the saloon clap open. Who comes moseying into town?
The piano player stops playing. Everyone turns.
Hesse Denny moseying in, looking for a movie, and then I here's your ticket, and I flipped it into a spittoon for her, and I was like, you want to see this 35 millimeter screening of Howard Hawks' classic American Western, and fish it out of there.
I was crawling for the spittoon, and then Kath stopped me. Stopped my hand.
Yeah, there's a great bit of movie kismet, and Hesse was actually sitting right next to Catherine and I. Great movie minds think alike, and that inspired this episode. We figured, it's summer, it's hot out. What are you going to do? What is there to do in the summer? Well, the answer is hang out with your friends and take it easy. And in light of that, we're going to talk about two Howard Hawks classic westerns, 1959's Rio Bravo and 1966's El Dorado, which gives us an opportunity to talk about, American master Howard Hawks, the sort of classic American Western as a genre, but more than anything, to talk about two movies that are really, at the end of the day, just about hanging out with your friends. They're about smoking cigarettes with your friends, going on walks, taking a bath with your homie. This is a movie, Rio Bravo especially, portrays like everything that makes Howard Hawks the kind of auteurist critic and filmmaker's favorite director, about how he sort of, in every conceivable genre of movie, like displayed a total mastery and also sort of smuggled in a lot of his, as Roger Ebert called it, laconic values and sort of like his personal style across westerns, war movies, screwball comedies. I mean, Hesse, where do you want to start with Howard Hawks?
I mean, where do you even start? He's the king. Like noir movies, horror movies.
The Thing, To Have and To Have Not.
Yes.
Bringing Up Baby.
Big
Just
Sleep.
those three movies right there. Like, think how varied but also how similar in his beautiful economy of style Howard Hawks manages to create in all of his films.
Bringing Up Baby, one of the great thrillers of all time. Completely nerve-wracking film.
Bringing Up Baby, one of my favorite comedies of all time. You got Sergeant York, Red River, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, Scarface, His Girl Friday. The list goes on and on here.
Big Sleep.
Yeah. And by way of introducing Howard Hawks to you, listener, if you're not familiar with his movies or haven't taken the opportunity to watch a classic like Rio Bravo or Red River, basically, if as similar to what I said about Visconti, and if like Scorsese is your guy, you have to take the time out to just see The Leopard and experience that movie. If John Carpenter is your guy, you must watch Howard Hawks' movies to understand the Carpenter's like that economy of style, that very sparse, stark compositions, and his use of music, and more than anything, as we see in Rio Bravo and El Dorado, movies about love stories about men, but people who have to survive under pressure, people who have to like kind of come together in a single location, besieged by some outer force that they have to have to sort of learn to work together and survive in this kind of bottle conditions.
Yeah, the impending outlaw kind of the chaotic outlaws encroaching on the lawmen who are often always end up holed up in the sheriff's office in the middle of town.
Those circumstances that present themselves in both of these movies, like the pressure cooker scenario, is really just an excuse to have three guys kind of get to know who are either already in love with each other and rekindle that love between one another, or just kind of like get to know each other and just hang out, sing songs. Like I said, take a bath together. So like Rio Bravo and El Dorado are basically El Dorado is a remake of Rio Bravo essentially, and then how Hawks would go on again to remake this movie a third time in Rio Lobo, and all three of them star John Wayne, the Duke, the sort of the icon of the sort of classic American Western and kind of reactionary mid-century American masculinity. But like, in these movies, they employ the same tropes. It's just variations on the same themes here. And like I said, there's the theme of hanging out with your friends, taking a walk. But it's also about having the one homie who fell off and you have to help out. And there's also put on the new kid who wants to be gang, but has a name named after a state like Colorado or Mississippi. Sort of the hot young kid. There's the rich cattle baron. There's the fallen woman. There's the horrors of alcoholism. Yeah. And then of course you have to have the rootin' tootin' dadgummit 19th century coot stereotype played by Walter Brennan. The guy who says consarn it and jumpin' Jehoshaphat and gang dang gubbit. It's about like I said, male love stories of male camaraderie. And credit again to Nick Newman for sharing clips from John Carpenter's TCM curation of some of his favorite movies and him talking about Howard Hawks and Rio Bravo and how influential this movie has been on his career, because he's made this movie as a horror movie, not a Western, over and over again, like Assault on Precinct 13, The Thing, Prince of Darkness. Like in the classic American Western in these Howard Hawks movies, you see it's like the pressure, the men loving each other and thriving under pressure, they cohere to form a kind of American identity. And like as we talked about in McCabe and Mrs. Miller, the formation of a proto-American community and how like the force of the law to bind civilization against the forces of sort of strength, aggression, and money.
Yeah, money especially.
Yeah. And in John Carpenter's movies, like those same forces cohere to bring about annihilation and the apocalypse.
Yeah, the devil. Like the literal devil is the one who's trying to get into the jail.
But like it's about how like the sort of the repetition and exercise of these tropes, and just sort of like the great American canvas of like the lawman, the drunk, the rancher, the fallen woman, you know, like how these things kind of come together and what they mean about American identity. And in John Carpenter's comments on this movie, he says that this movie, and really a theme throughout all of Hawks's work to him, is about the measure of being a professional. There's a line in it where John Wayne says to Dean Martin's character, are you good enough? You know, it's this question of, can you do the work? And I think about that, like that mark of professionalism and like this lack of pretension that exists in John Carpenter's work that you see in Howard Hawks as well. And I just like to say, like, you know, our experiencing this projected on 35 millimeter at the Roxy, I mean, was fantastic because you really get this
magical.
The Technicolor. The Technicolor in both of these movies, those big blue skies, the deep red of John Wayne's, you know, cowboy shirts, the way his eyes pop, you know, called old blue eyes. It's just every frame of these movies looks like a canvas. It's just it's so beautifully and richly and warmly. There's just such a
vivid, like,
yeah. There's such a warmth to Rio Bravo, and I guess like basically the same movie. I will say El Dorado is a great Western. It's just a great Western, and you got Robert Mitchum, who's awesome. You got James Caan as Mississippi, the young cool kid.
I describe like El Dorado is like Rio Bravo with extra steps.
It's
like
got a little more action, a little bit of backstory is a little bit more fleshed out. It's a great Western, but in expanding the aperture of this very simple like the plot and tropes, I think it loses something because it's merely a great classic Western, whereas I think Rio Bravo is truly something special. I think it's like an American original. It's a true American masterpiece, a really singular, unique movie.
I thought I liked El Dorado more until I rewatched them both this morning, and I was like, no, Rio Bravo is the GOAT for sure. They both go so hard though. They're both awesome.
It's just, in Rio Bravo, it's just once again, it's like it's the lushness of the Technicolor, but it's also like the complete minimalism of it. Like Rio Bravo is basically a couple set changes. That's what happens in that movie. Like they just there's 3 or 4 locations, and they cycle about walking about back and forth between them, and then there's a climax at the end. But it really is just the pacing of it is like, I don't know about you, Hesse. Let's talk about our relationship with the Western genre, because it took me a while to sort of understand and get to like the kind of classic era of 40s and 50s American Westerns, because like I always loved the Western genre, but to me it was always about Clint Eastwood and those 60s and 70s kind of subversive, countercultural, sort of very modern sort of postmodern westerns, and like the sort of the contrast between Clint and John Wayne is this kind of generational divide, because Clint, whether he was an anti-hero or not, Clint is always cool. And John Wayne is just like, he's the antithesis of cool.
Yeah. He's a big lug. He's a big hoss, as my friends Will Sennett and Nate Fisher might say. He's
a big he's a big hoss. I mean, you see him standing next to Dean Martin. He's a big guy. Dean Martin looks like a kid standing next to him. Yeah.
He is huge, especially when he's standing next to Carlos in Rio Bravo. He's just towering above him. But he the John Wayne's character in this is very I don't know, goofy. He has something akin to Cary Grant in Bringing Up Baby, especially in Rio Bravo, with a lot of the quick repartee of the dialogue, the
banter between him and Angie Dickinson, where it's the more she flirts with him, the more flustered and angry he gets.
Yeah, or Carlos, there's a scene where Carlos is trying to explain to him how he got a black eye, trying to get Angie Dickinson on the carriage, and it's just a wonderful comedy of misunderstandings. And there's a certain goofball not goofball, almost reluctant kind of silliness to him that I think does come across, and that I think gets ignored a lot when people talk about John Wayne's persona. I think a lot of people think The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, where it's very he's very taciturn, very serious, not a joke in sight, just basically a statue, might as well be stop motion. And then in this, where he's kissing Stumpy in Rio Bravo, where he kisses Stumpy on the forehead and then runs out of the room before he can slap his ass.
Yeah, they're having fun in this. It's just guys having fun, and you're right. People think of Wayne as this very because of his cultural politics, or just sort of being associated with this kind of anti-counterculture. But no, he is kind of being a goofball in these movies. And I guess the thing for me with John Wayne is that I always sort of I kept him at an arm's length when I was younger, but now I wholly embrace him as a great American movie star. But the thing is, in all of his most iconic movies, he is absolutely outshone and outclassed by his co-stars in every role. Absolutely. In almost every role. And the thing is, I don't really say that as a demerit on Wayne, because to me, John Wayne is just the constant. He's just sort of he's the assurance. It's the deal you make when you sit down and press play, the handshake deal that you make with the filmmakers. He is the constant, the assurance that all of the other Western tropes are legible and correctly placed. It's just him there as this kind of static figure is what makes legible all the other tropes and sort of meaning of the movies.
I was thinking kind of the same thing when I was rewatching Rio Bravo, when I was okay, so there's Colorado, who represents this male vision of youth kind of, and then there's Stumpy, who represents this kind of older male character who's a goofball and who's past his prime but still useful and still still does the work that he still does the work, he still does praxis. And then
he still acts as the jailer. And if Chance comes in with three fellas, I don't know, telling me to open up there, I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm blasting. The line where Stumpy, as Walter Brennan says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm blasting. I'm going to start blasting.
He's the best part of the movie, honestly. He's so good. But and then there's Dean Martin as kind of this middle-aged man,
Borrachon, the drunk. Before Jeffrey Lebowski's The Dude, there was Dean Martin as just dude.
Mm-hmm. And he and then John Wayne kind of stands outside of this trinity of masculine types as kind of just the arbiter, the father of everything.
He is the measure against which all other masculinities are sort of judged and sort of contrasted with. And you're totally right. There's the trinity of youth, middle age, and sort of senility and dotage represented by Walter Brennan and Stumpy. But all of them are like, it goes back to this Carpenter question of, are you good enough? You know, can you do the job? Like with Colorado, played by Ricky Nelson, who was, for his time, like this kind of teen heartthrob crooner.
Twink. They put a twink in there with him.
And it would be sort of like Harry Styles being in a movie today.
Yeah.
And, you know, he's the young gun, and everyone says how fast he is. And then it's just a question of, like, is he really fast enough? Is he really as good as people say he is? And then with Dino, the real emotional core of Rio Bravo is Dean Martin's character, and in a truly phenomenal performance by Dino, who was always like kind of comic relief and playing or sort of a caricature of himself. But his performance in this movie really does quite movingly and seriously deal with alcoholism. And sort of like, and it's the core of the movie is about his struggle to reclaim his dignity and the dignity of being useful to others, of being of being attentive to and helpful to your friends.
My favorite is the way that they portray it visually through his like costume and hair and like facial hair, because at the beginning of the movie he's a total drunk and he has this kind of sexy 5 o'clock shadow, but he's wearing like this disgusting
rags,
like Henley shirt. Yeah. And it's like, and they do the same with Robert Mitchum.
His face is always like it's dirty. There's like big streaks of mud on his face from just like passing out in like a horse stable.
And they do the same with like Robert Mitchum in El Dorado, who plays the same type of character, the rummy kind of. Also, it's very funny to cast people who are like almost definitely actual alcoholics in real life.
Yes. No, Dino struggled with the bottle, and I mean it was part of his routine practically.
Yeah.
I mean, he was like, that's what people expected from him, and I'm sure it took a toll. But on the subject of using wardrobe to like portray someone's dissolution, I love in El Dorado, like the first person you see on screen is Mitchum when he has his shit together, and like they portray his sobriety because he's wearing one of those sort of like breastplate Western style shirts with like 11 buttons on it, and they're all buttoned up tight. And then the next time you see him, he is like wearing a potato sack.
He's wearing with the worst shirt I've ever seen in any movie. Yeah. But like the way that they do like the Dean Martin like transformation in Rio Bravo is like he wipes the mud off his face, and then he gets a shave, and then after the shave he gets his guns back, and then after that he gets his clothes back, and then there's a moment where he gets snuck up on. They get the jump on him.
They got the jump on him.
They dump him into a horse trough, and then like into mud, and then again he was clean for a very short period of time in the movie, and then he's instantly just filthy and disgusting again. And he has to fight his way back, you know?
Taking baths are like a very important hinge point in both of these movies.
Yes.
Like, you know, Mitchum has to get, you know, soaped up too. They just put him in a bucket in the jail, and he's like,
the smallest bucket I've ever seen.
He's in a teacup, soaping himself up.
He's in a bucket that Bugs Bunny would put at the bottom of a 200-foot like high dive. He's sitting in that and shower and like bathing.
But yeah, I mean, like you said, like El Dorado is just Rio Bravo with a little bit more backstory and setup. But I guess like in Rio Bravo, both of these movies just begin too. It's just you're just like thrown in, and you see Dean Martin shambling around, and like you know some. The brother of like the big ranch, the big landowner, the cattle baron. He like you know all the other rummies at the bar get like sadistically like torturing the old drunk played by Dean Martin, and he like flips like a silver dollar into a spittoon because he's like, oh, you're that like if you're that desperate for a drink, like degrade yourself for our amusement so that you can get another swig on the whiskey bottle, and then like right before Dino goes in to fish it out, John Wayne's foot comes in, kicks over the spittoon, and roughs him up. And then, like, out of that altercation, the brother murders a guy in the bar. And John Wayne has to arrest him. And then, like, Dean backs him up because, like, when the movie first started, you don't know if they know each other. But
Yeah.
but like then it is filled in that like they were once very close friends, and like they were partners. He was a sheriff and a deputy, and then like Dean
It's always
fell
a
for-
mysterious girl. A mysterious girl who left on the stagecoach
a
one
girl
day.
arrives on the stagecoach. You're fine. She leaves on the stagecoach. You're drinking whiskey out of a boot for the next 3 years of your life.
Everyone told me she was no good, and I didn't listen. They always say that in this and in Rio Bravo and El Dorado. But something that shocked me that I totally forgot about Rio Bravo, watching in the theater, that my like jaw was on the floor, is that like the first like 10 minutes are totally silent, are like completely like the first words are. Maybe not 10 minutes, but the first words are John Wayne being like, "Joe, you're under arrest," and like pointing the gun at the brother. And I just like, that's so sick. The way that like this complete fiction of like this incredible like legend of the West is playing out in just like total, without any dialogue whatsoever. You know the characters, you know the players, you can just like, tell what's going on by the archetypes on screen.
Yeah,
And then,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So like I was struck rewatching it on film is how much the actor who plays Joe Burdett looks like Ron DeSantis.
Yeah,
And actually,
it's
he would go on to portray Sheriff Lobo in the TV series that Homer Simpson wants to be brought back. They have to they put him in the jail, and Walter Brennan is the jailer, who's just like you're be fixing to get 3 squares and a cot from me, but Walter Brennan, one of the great American character actors, and one of the greatest, and by greatest I mean worst and most evil Hollywood right wingers. Just a little backstory on Walter Brennan. I guess you could use this in contrast to Burt Lancaster. Walter Brennan was an absolute like John Birch level right wing crank his entire career. His house in San Fernando, California, he kitted it out with a survival bunker stocked with weapons and food for what he assumed was an imminent Soviet invasion of America. He supported all kinds of anti-communist causes, and then prayer in school, but was also known mainly for his virulent racism, which manifested itself in the famous incident of him dancing a jig on the set of the movie he was filming when they heard that Martin Luther King was killed.
Oh my God. So crazy.
I bet you don't
literally
like-
they pulled a prospector out of a time machine and put him in movies.
He's from Boston. He was born in Boston. Well, I guess that makes sense.
Of course.
He's also like the Tennessee preacher that brings Gary Cooper to Jesus in Sergeant York, another great Howard Hawks film. He was the stock character actor for playing these sort of like old coot type figures. You've also got Ward Bond as the guy who's leading like the wagon train into town, the guy who gets killed because he wants to help John Wayne. Ward Bond was a guy who's basically he's in every John Wayne movie. Like he has a supporting role in most of John Wayne's westerns.
He's his homie. He's like,
and then of course we have Angie Dickinson as Feathers, the fallen woman character who sparks a romance with John Wayne.
Queen Angie Dickinson.
Angie Dickinson is great in this movie. Like I said, she gets Wayne heated by flirting with him, and I love the scene where John Wayne says to her, "You could quit playing cards and wearing feathers," because she's got like a bill of arrest out on her. She's like, she was the kind of the mall to this card sharp who was traveling the Mississippi, cheating people out of money until it finally caught up with him, and he gets killed when they catch
She
him
was
cheating.
his girl Friday in a manner
exactly.
of speaking.
And she's sort of living by her wits, trying to raise money for the next stagecoach as she goes from town to town and stay one step ahead of the law. And John Wayne says to her at one point, "You could quit playing cards and wearing feathers," and she just goes, "No, I'm not going to do that."
Yeah.
That's who I am. And also he says to her, "Sounds like you had a hard time," and she goes, "No, I had a good time." Until it got bad, but she was like,
she's so cool. And I love there's several scenes where she is just saying her thoughts out loud, like talking to John Wayne or Colorado, and it just talking long enough for a woman if you let a woman talk to herself long enough, she'll eventually be in hysterics, sobbing about how in love she is with someone. And like, it's really amazing. I love her in this.
Well, the best advice about women given in these movies, because these are movies about men, of course, comes from Carlos, the innkeeper, who tells John Wayne at one point, like, about Consuela, his wife or girlfriend. He goes, if she's mad, and I'm sorry, it will be much pleasure to make her happy. If she's not mad, it's still the same pleasure.
Yeah, she's not mad. Yeah. No, I love that.
Like he's just part of the community that kind of coheres around Dino and John Wayne as they fend off the aggression and hired guns of Nathan Burdett, the older the evil rich cattle baron, which is like played by Ed Asner in El Dorado.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. Hesse, what did you feel about having actors like Ed Asner and Robert Mitchum show up in Westerns? Because, like, I don't know. It's just like they're so frozen in my mind as being of the 20th century that, like, unlike John Wayne, who, yeah, like, looks like he walked out of, like a Civil War battlefield or something.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, so something about Mitchum and even Dino, they seem sort of out of place and sort of more modern than their settings. But I mean, I think that's just bias of how I view them as actors and cultural figures.
When I think Mitchum, the first thing that pops into my head is him on the Dick Cavett show, where he's wearing those like tinted sunglasses, and he's like, yeah, before I was an actor, I was using a steel lathe, and a piece of steel flew into my eyeball, and I went blind for 2 weeks, but I just didn't go to the doctor, and it stopped being blind. It's like, wow, cool.
I'm sort of amazed we didn't in season 1 of Movie Mindset do a Robert Mitchum episode, but like rest assured that's got to be coming in the future.
Oh yeah,
because Mitchum is the king. And I remember a long time ago reading or seeing some interview with Mitchum where, like, in the 60s, because famously he was the first Hollywood celeb busted for smoking jazz cigarettes, for smoking marijuana, and like he was sort of a bridge between that old Hollywood and sort of a newer counterculture. And he was kind of one of the old Western gangster actors that was like thought of as hip because he smokes reefer. And it was like someone was asking him about John Wayne, who was very much held as the opposite. He was like the avatar of the 60s counter revolution. And they were like, oh, like does John Wayne, does he indulge or whatever? And Mitchum was just like, the thing you got to know about the Duke does everything. He was like, the Duke does it all. It was like pills, booze, weed. It was like, don't get it twisted. John Wayne could party. He could fucking party.
Don't get it twisted.
Yeah.
John Wayne doing ketamine, doing GHB, going in nowadays.
He's a circuit guy, John Wayne.
Yeah.
Well, actually, let me ask you about this. I don't know if this is just me being bratty and needing to read homoerotic subtext into like classic American stories. But what do you make of the relationship between John Wayne and Ricky Nelson and John Wayne and James Caan in both of these movies? Because there's definitely like a daddy rent boy thing. Am I crazy feeling that?
No, I mean, this is like something that's like ever since the very first Western, I feel like it's been, because the first, I think, what was the first like talky golden era Western? Like the Virginian, probably. I think even before Stagecoach.
Oh,
like,
God.
I think the first like Western I think of is The Outlaw, which if anyone listening hasn't seen The Outlaw, you need to watch it like ASAP.
I have not seen The Outlaw, so I'm.
Oh my God,
The
Outlaw is like one of the funniest movies I've ever seen because it's the most overtly gay movie I've ever seen in my entire life. It's Howard Hughes. It was John. I think it was John Huston directing it, but he quit when he realized how gay it is. And like, Howard Hughes like finished directing it, and it's basically the same as this, where it's like this old gunslinger kind of passing the reins over to a newer gunslinger. But in The Outlaw, that's basically the term they use. They keep talking about the horse, their horses, and like it's Doc Holliday and Billy the Kid. And he's like Doc Holliday. Someone tells Doc Holliday, "Oh, Billy the Kid's in town. You have a look at his horse. It's even bigger than your horse is, Doc." And when you were his age, you're like, "I'd like to see him try." And he's like, sees Billy the Kid, and he's like, it's truly insane because he's like, "Bet you don't know this horse knows tricks. You can get it to shake. You can get the horse to shake if you really want." They're getting like so close to each other's faces. And Billy the Kid's like, "Oh, wow, I didn't know that." Because it's the worst actor you've ever seen in your life. Just some twink. And it's very reminiscent of this, like, the dynamic between, like, all Westerns are gay. Because, like, the ending of every Western is that, like, the guy, the outlaw type guy, finds a girl and then is domesticated. And that's, like, the happy ending, but the real happiness is the journey. It's the part where there's no woman. And which is why in The Outlaw, the two main characters are having a fight the whole movie over who has to get married and who gets to keep the horse and keep riding around.
I mean, like that is the Western genre because it's about, like, you know, sort of about the lawman and the outlaw, but, like, you know, men who hew their violence to a certain code. And out of that forge of violence and kind of proto-civilization comes American community. But, like, you're so right that the ending always has to be someone settling down and getting married. But, like, the joy of the Western and what it represents in the American consciousness is this, like, mythology of freedom and liberation from the constraints of, you know, feminized bourgeois society. It's just, you know, to be rolling cigs with your homies, playing with guns, going on walks, and taking baths together, as I simply must stress.
Yeah, exactly.
And, like, that is really, that I think that to me is the beauty of Rio Bravo, because it's like, what is it, like 3 or 4 days in this town, and it's just John Wayne. It's like Dean Martin struggling to put his life back together, but but he's able to do that because he's given something to do. And what that is like, we're gonna walk down the one street in this town and see what happens.
Yeah.
And, like, that's basically the action of this movie.
And I also love that, like, the end of the movie, before, like, right before the big climax, they come to the hilarious realization where they're like, "Oh, if we just sit in here, then they can't do anything."
Yeah. Because
they're like,
as soon as they tell Nathan Burdett, like the older brother who's hiring all these killers and cutthroats to break out his brother or kill the sheriff and his deputies. When Wayne just tells him, he's like, "If anyone tries anything in this jail, your brother is the first to die. Like, we got a gun on him at 24/7. And he's like, "Well, wouldn't that be murder?" And Wayne's just like, "Who's counting at that point? We'll all be dead. What's the problem?" Like,
yeah. And the brother is like, the brother's cheekbones
John Russell
are unreal. Whoever did his fillers, oh honey.
He's in a bunch of Clint Eastwood westerns. He's in The Outlaw Josie Wales, and he's also in The Pale Rider. I know the movie I mentioned on our Clint Eastwood episode. But we should also talk about the music in Rio Bravo, because it's got, like, this great original score. But another thing Carpenter talked about in the TCM clip is the Cutthroat's anthem.
The Cutthroat's anthem is, like, the coolest shit ever. It's so sick.
This is, like, an apocryphal story about the Alamo, where, like, the Mexican army was just serenading these guys night and day until they all killed them all at the very end of it. But the music that you hear in this movie is original to the movie. It's an invention of the composer. And it's something that where, like, Nathan Burdett and his gang are held up at their saloon, and he pays the mariachis to start playing this song. And Ricky Nelson, the Colorado, comes by the jail, and he's just like, "Well, if Burnett hasn't spoken to you yet, he's speaking now, because you know what this song is? It's what they played to the boys, those Texas boys at the Alamo." And Wayne is just like, "Oh, I see what it is. No quarter, no mercy for the losers." But I just love that idea of like serenading your foes and just being like, "Hey, you recognize this song? You know what it means? We're gonna kill your ass as soon as we can."
There's so many like awesome little like touches that you wouldn't necessarily think would be in like a golden era western, like that, the diegetic music of like the characters hearing this like amazing song, and like, I don't know, a bunch of other crazy little like visual flourishes. Like when you first see Consuela, she walks in and like stops right so that like the bull horns above the doorway threshold in the saloon are right behind her head as she's yelling at Carlos. So it looks like she has these like horns on her head like the fucking devil. And yeah, just like so much like little shit like that just always makes me think like, damn,
that's another thing. That's another thing Carpenter said in his TCM interview, is that like why his movies matter to him is just like how modern he regards, like how modern the style of Howard Hawks is, and how much that informed the generation that came after them. Even though like these movies, at least on like for me as a younger age, or at least on first glance, seem like a very dated and like of a different time, but they're really not. Like I mean, because they're I mean, like they feel alive, and like they feel warm and alive in a way that I think is really modern and like, contemporary.
Yeah,
and as long as we're talking about music in this movie, we have to talk about, to me, the singular scene of pure cinema in Rio Bravo that elevates it from an American masterpiece to like I think like a thing of transcendent beauty. And that is simply my rifle, my pony, and me.
Just my rifle, pony, and me. Gonna hang my sombrero on the limb of a tree. Coming home, sweetheart, darling. Just my rifle, pony, and me.
Whippoorwill in the willow sings a sweet melody.
It is a scene that is like unannounced, comes out of nowhere, plays for a really long time, but it is just it's Walter Brennan, John Wayne, Dean Martin, and Ricky Nelson, and it's like their last night. They're like under siege. They're all holed up in the jail together. They got their cigarettes. Dino's got some beer to keep his hands from shaking. You know, that's another thing these movies talk about. You can be an alcoholic, but if you just drink beer, you're okay.
Yeah, that was so funny.
But the scene comes out of nowhere, and it's Dean Martin. He's lying on the cot. He's got his hat like tilted like all the way over his eyes, and he just gives you some of those beautiful pipes. You hear that beautiful Dean Martin voice, and he sings a little cowboy ballad about like, you know, about a cowboy. There's no more steers left to be roping. He's heading down to Amarillo. He wants to be in that purple sunset sky, and he just wants to be with his three good companions: my rifle, my pony, and me. And Brennan's tooting on the harmonica. Ricky Nelson's accompanying backup vocals. He's strumming the guitar. And then like Wayne has nothing to do in this scene. He's just grinning. He just looks happy to be with his friends.
He's hanging out.
He doesn't sing. He doesn't contribute. Doesn't say, hey, like, I love that song. But it's just, that's what I mean about like this. There's no reason for it to be in the movie. But like just letting that scene breathe and just having like these four guys just enjoy each other's company and just bond and then love each other. There's something that's just like, my brain just hums when that scene happens.
Yeah, it's incredible. And I love that Stumpy, after they finish the song, is like, why don't you play something I can sing now? And then they actually do. They play a
and
whole...
they do Cindy.
They do an encore, yeah.
Yeah, Nick Cave does a cover of that song, too. So, get along home, Cindy, Cindy. I'll marry you someday. But yeah, like, just like the time that takes out of the movie of like, and this is like in the third act, it's like right before the climax. It would seem to like halt all the momentum of the movie, but it really just, it crystallizes everything that the movie's about in a way that's so unexpected and beautiful, and like it just comes out of nowhere. But it's just sort of like, just Dean Martin's voice is so good, and just it's just so much fun. It just makes you want to be there and hang out with these guys.
Yeah, it's like, it really, like, the whole movie is about like the American like males kind of like, I don't know, journey of like trying to get shit done and getting over their demons by doing that. And I think like Dean Martin kind of represents that. And like, yeah, it's this beautiful thing that like only only Dean Martin can be doing that while also singing a beautiful ballad about, being a cowboy.
And you're right. It's about getting over your demons, but by doing things, by doing the work. Get back to this idea and
Praxis.
So often throughout the movie, Dino's character, dude, is sort of distracted from the DTs, from like his hand shaking and like him just like sweating gasoline because of how badly he like fucking needs to hit that bottle. That he kicks his habit because he's given something useful to do. He has given something to distract his mind from the terrible physical and mental toll of alcoholism.
Yeah, the moment where it all like really crystallizes for him is where he's about to take another swig of he's about to take a shot and give up after he gets his clothes all dirtied again and stuff. And he pours the drink into the shot glass and then like freezes. And because the Cutthroat Anthem is playing, and he's just like, and then he's like, pours it back into the bottle, and he's like, didn't spill a drop. Because it's the call
drunk,
is
drunk, sober, or whatever. You'd have to be a fucking brain surgeon to do that. To pour a shot back into a bottle without spilling anything. Not even with a gun to my head could I pull that off.
It's so cool. And like he's like, it's the Cutthroat Anthem is like the klaxon call to action. It's like, all right, enough bullshitting. It's time to like man up. And he realizes it and just like completely stops shaking and is like, yep, time to go.
Well, after being like a very kind of patient and sort of low-key movie, the climax of this movie is just pure fun. The shootout at the end of this movie is just, if the homies weren't having fun before, once they start throwing dynamite at a house full of people and shooting the dynamite sticks in the air as they blow up, you're having a blast with your friends. Because like, when Dean Martin takes a bath, the Cutthroats, they get the drop on them. They get the drop on Wayne and Martin, and they take Dean Martin hostage, and they're going to ransom Dean Martin for the brother. And there's this like, there's supposed to be this trade-off, but like as they're passing each other, walking towards each other, Dean Martin just tackles this guy, and then the shootout commences. And then they've told our dear old Stumpy, we don't need you, you're too old and disabled. But he's like, darn it, if there's going to be shooting, I'm going to have a good seat for it. And he shows up and saves them. But then they're like, no, Stumpy, you're shooting from right next to a wagon full of dynamite. And he's like, oh, but who's a vet? But then he has a brilliant idea. He's like, well, let me just take one of these crates of dynamite, and we're just going to start chucking them because like Burdett and all his guns are like, they're holed up in this farmhouse. And they just start chucking dynamite at this farmhouse until they all just come out with their hands up.
And Stumpy has an arm on him. He cranks some of those dynamites. It's really funny because he keeps throwing them short, and they keep like yelling at him like, can't you throw them any further? And he's like working his way up to throwing them. Like they got to get their money's worth out of the dynamite exploding.
Like, are you trying to blow down? You're trying to blow up that whole dang house or whatever? And John Wayne's like, that's the general idea.
Yeah.
So they emerge victorious. Like the law is, like the forces of civilization stand up to those of money and sort of the bullying and privilege that goes with being able to. And we see this in El Dorado too. There's a theme of like the masculine ideal of the American man as one who can stand alone by themselves and like defend themselves or earn a living with their skill, or particularly with their revolver. Because like that's like the demarcation of like your willingness and comfort with using lethal violence against other men is sort of like what. That's the boundary between you and other men. And if that if that boundary can be transgressed, then you're not a man at all. Like you'll be pushed around by the next guy with a gun. Yeah. And there's this idea about like that wealth and power gives you the ability to just buy other men who have a gun and are willing to die or kill for it. But like it's the way that distorts the kind of the heroic ideal of being a man who can stand for himself rather than just use money to let other people do it for you.
And there's also kind of a judgment call, like a further demarcation in El Dorado, where John Wayne gets offered. The movie starts with John Wayne being offered that kind of hired gun role, and he turns it down because he's like, actually, this like, my friend is the sheriff, but also he's like, this family that owns this town is like actually a noble family, and they worked hard for their keep, and I don't want to be part of like bullying them. And that's kind of the line drawn between John Wayne and Nels McLeod, the Scarface gunslinger,
who's
awesome in that
McLeod
movie.
Is great,
He's so cool, and he's like, there's a real respect between John Wayne and him,
professional courtesy, as they say to each other back and forth many times in that movie.
Yeah, and it's like but John Wayne gets the drop on McLeod because he underestimates him, and he like dives and shoots him with his like bum arm.
Yeah.
And McLeod is like,
it's a great moment where he was just like, he was like throughout the whole movie, him and McLeod are like, when they first meet each other, he's like, he doesn't know who John Wayne is, but he's like, there's only 3 guys I know who could be as fast as me. Like this dude, he names John Wayne's character and some other guy. And he's like, well, I am this guy. So from that point, he's like, their rep precedes them.
He's like, one of them's dead, the other's me, and then the third is
you.
Yeah.
So there's this question of like, if they end up on opposite sides of this range war, are they ever going to get to truly test out? Are you good enough? Who's better? Who's faster? And at the end of El Dorado, which is like, it's made in 1966. It's like 7 or 8 years later. And in both the Mitchum and Wayne character, who are a little bit older at this point, there begins to be like coming out of middle age more, because John Wayne's character gets shot early in the movie and he has like a bullet lodged near his spine or something that he just sort of deals with for most of the movie.
Yeah,
but there's a question about
the doctor's like, I can't dig it out, but just try to go to another doctor and ask them about it later on, maybe. Okay.
But like, near the climax of El Dorado, like John Wayne has the upper hand during a shootout, and like his back seizes up, and like the whole left side of his body becomes paralyzed.
Yeah.
And he can't hold the gun anymore. So like both him and Mitchum in that movie, it's a question not just of like, can you do the work, but can you still do the work?
Yeah.
Like, is your body going to give out on you? Like, are you truly as fast or as tough as you once were? And at the end of the movie, like Wayne kind of plays possum, and he kind of dives off this stagecoach and just shoots McLeod as he's falling. Like he doesn't give him a chance to draw. And as he's dying, McLeod sort of smiles at him and he goes, "You never even gave me a chance, did you?" And John Wayne goes, "You're too good. Like,
you're too good
that's
to give
the only
a
chance I had.
to."
Yeah, you're too good to give any chance to." And then he like, it's not even cheating. He just sort of smiles and gets it. Because once again, it goes back to this idea of the work and being a professional.
Mm-hmm. It's all about you got to get the job done,
There's a few things I want to talk about in El Dorado, but I just want to get to the last scene in Rio Bravo, where, like you said, John Wayne has to be domesticated. Is Feathers going to leave on that stagecoach? And he goes to her room at the hotel, and she's wearing this like very sort of like 19th century hoe outfit. She's got the the lingerie, the feather boa, and
the corset.
There's this great the corset. She's all pushed up. And it's sort of like there's this question of like, oh, like, is she just going to be a prostitute to pay her way to the next town? And then like there's this whole like this moment with her where she gets like, she wants to know, will he let her go outside wearing this corset? And then he finally breaks down. He's like, if you go out wearing that, I'll arrest you. And that's when she knows that he loves her.
Yeah,
because he's like
Rudy
Giuliani. He's like, those tits belong to me. I want to claim my tits. No one else can see those tits. And she's like, would you like me to dress like this only for you? And he's like, you betcha.
Yeah. And it harkens back to their first meeting when Carlos is showing him these sexual pantaloons that he bought for Consuela. Yeah.
Sexual style pantaloons. This is like the hottest thing you could wear as a woman in the 19th century was just basically like bright red MC Hammer pants that you would wear under 8 other dresses.
It's so funny. And like, he's like, like Angie Dickinson appears in the door and is like, they have like a little tete-a-tete, and then as John Wayne is leaving, she says, "Oh, Sheriff, you forgot your pants." He like freezes for a second. It's like the pants are on the other legs, I guess. Now at the end.
But yeah, like, and was it Carlos helps him out during the shooting? I just think Rio Bravo, as compared to El Dorado, it's just so much more focused on the town and its residents and its inhabitants, whereas El Dorado really is more just a kind of about John Wayne and Robert Mitchum and their various paths in life. El Dorado seems like more of a conventional movie in a lot of what you expect from like the plot of a movie than Rio Bravo. It seems like much more conventional in a lot of ways.
For example, the instead of the, I think kind of an analog you can draw between the two is Rio Bravo has the songs that Dean Martin and it has like those songs, and then it also has the Cutthroat anthem, which is this recurring musical motif. And then in El Dorado, instead of a song, it's this poem that James Caan keeps saying.
By Edgar Allan Poe, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I got like the feeling, I was watching it thinking like I wonder if James Caan, if they asked him to sing this and he was just a bad singer and they couldn't do it, and so he just has to say it like a poem, because it's very awkward. It's kind of awkward him being like, "Well, time to say this poem now," and the kind of equivalent of the Cutthroat song, I guess, is the Stumpy of that film's like bugle call.
Yeah, he's like a cracked cavalry veteran who just like is not as old or decrepit as Stumpy, but like he sort of he needs to communicate through his bugle. He's always just running in and out of rooms, signaling retreat or advance on his.
Yeah, and there's not as much comic relief. It's much more. Yeah, it's a much more straightforward.
I mean, actually, I think honestly, like Robert Mitchum's portrayal of alcoholism is way more played for laughs than Dean Martin's.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, okay, you remember the scene where they're like Wayne is encountering Mitchum, and like, by the way, like in this movie, it's very clear that like they've only been apart for like 7 months, but in that like half a year, Robert Mitchum's life has completely gone to shit.
Yeah.
That he is just not crawling out of a bottle for the last half year. Mm-hmm. And like, he's tied one on tight, and he's just like passed out in the jail. And then like they have to, like, because like, the McLeod and his killers are coming. Like Wayne knows that they've been hired and they're coming to town to take out Robert Mitchum. So they have to sober him up. And James Caan's character, Mississippi, whose real name is like, what's his name in that movie?
His name, hang on, I have it pulled up here in another window. Hang on. Alan Bourdion Traherne.
So everyone just call him Mississippi. Yeah. So the bootleg sort of hangover cure that James Caan comes up in that movie, where they basically mix like cayenne pepper and motor oil together.
Yeah. Cayenne pepper, like absinthe, and gunpowder is the final ingredient. They open up a bunch of bullets and pour them into this deadly concoction.
And they just, so there's a scene where like they pinch his nose and just pour this down his gullet to sober him up, and then like it's so toxic that you throw up everything in your stomach, and it also prevents it's so brutal to your stomach that it prevents you from drinking alcohol after you've taken the cure. So, in one of the funniest scenes in El Dorado, they just pour this down Mitchum's throat as he's like barely conscious, and then as soon as they do, he starts convulsing, and Wayne goes, "Let's get out of here!" And they just lock him in there, like, "Hey, guys, quick, run!"
It's like they just planted dynamite or something.
Yeah. We just gave this highly dubious folklore cure to our friend here. They're like, "I don't know what's happening. Better get out of here! Run!"
It's literally Looney Tunes. It's like if they did that to Bugs Bunny and his head exploded or something. Yeah, I think a lot more of the comic relief is saddled on, and I wonder if this is because, like, as Hawks was getting older, he thought to like shift this in a way or something. But a lot less of the comic relief is on the older character, the older member of the posse, and a lot more of it is on James Caan and the younger kind of like most of the comic relief is Robert Mitchum and James Caan.
Because Robert Mitchum doesn't even know who James Caan is until like an hour and a half into the movie.
Yeah,
he's still like, who is this guy?
Who is Mrs. You keep saying Mississippi. Who is that?
Because he's like blinded drunk until like the last half hour of the movie. Yeah,
yeah.
I will say though, like El Dorado, I think in the young kid character, I think El Dorado has the edge because I think James Caan as Mississippi is just a lot cooler than Ricky Nelson as Colorado.
Well, I have a few thoughts on this. I think that Ricky Nelson is, God bless his heart, not a great actor in this movie. I mean,
no,
he plays that's like a character. He plays that character perfectly, the outlaw type. You know, like in The Outlaw, the same character is played by, I forget the actor, but it's the exact same performance. It's always like the mouth opens, like eyes squinted, barely moving, barely getting your words out of your mouth type performance. And I think like Ricky Nelson's, my theory is that they did some alchemy and they were like, okay, Rio Bravo, we had a twink, like a pure twink, Ricky Nelson. And then for El Dorado, he was like, what if we take the twink and we subtract the femininity and we take that and put it separately? Then we got James Caan and then this femininity. What do we do with it? Well, let's give the McDonald family, the good family, let's give them a daughter who's like feisty.
Kind of butch. And yeah, she shoots guns and has messy hair and is sort of like tougher than her brothers. And she's the one who shoots John Wayne at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah. She's the one who fucks everything up by shooting John Wayne at the very beginning.
But this is, by the way, this is after John Wayne killed her younger brother basically for no reason. I mean, not for no reason, but like, like he just kills this kid because he like wakes up too quickly and starts firing a rifle.
Well, it's an even sterner like admonition of men
don't send a
who
boy
won't
to
do
do a
the
man's
work.
job. Yeah,
of men who can't do the work. You know, it's all about doing the work.
And like that scene where like, okay, so like the younger brother has been left behind to sort of like guard his post, and like if Ed Asner's goons are coming for them, like he's to fire a shot in the air to warn them. And then hightail it out of there and get back to the house. He falls asleep on his post, and as John Wayne is riding back from like an unrelated encounter, he's sort of stirred awake and just like wakes up and just starts firing a rifle. And John Wayne just sees a guy with the high ground shooting a rifle, and he just, whips out his 6-shooter and plugs him right in the stomach. Mm-hmm. And then the dude kills himself.
Yeah,
like, this is
that
like
was
a really dark
crazy.
beginning into the movie because he's like your gut shot and like there's basically nothing I can do for you. So then you hear you hear a second shot.
He says John Wayne yells at the dad because he's like
because the dad was the one who told him that like hey, a gut shot, you should just kill yourself.
Yeah, John Wayne's
he was like he probably could have made it here.
It's literally, and it's like it really is like. A lot, there's like a cynicism in El Dorado that is not present. Like, even the kid, like, when he's gut shot, being like, my insides are on fire, I can't even move, like, it hurts so bad, is like, wow, that's something that would never be in, like, Rio Bravo. Like, if Dean Martin got shot, he would be like, oh, I'm all right, just skimmed me or something,
But yeah, like when John Wayne's character like comes back to the good family's ranch with just like their youngest brother slung over his horse and just depositing his body there, he's sort of like angry at the father. Yeah, like you said, for sending a boy to do a man's job, and he's dead because like not through any fault of my own, even though I basically killed him, but like he was just not competent enough to do the work. He didn't take it seriously, so then he ended up dead. And he was like, yeah, like you told him about the gut shot thing, and he was like, I was trying to help him, but he basically had a gun I didn't see. And you do the math, and he said, do you want to ask me any more questions? But the dad is like not even mad at John Wayne. He's sort of like, well, thank you. Yeah. Because otherwise, like if you just left him there, like coyotes would have just eaten his body. So I guess we can give him a Christian burial now. But thank you, guy who's good at his job of killing people, for sort of admonishing me for having a son who's not good at killing people.
Yeah, there's like a weird respect between, John Wayne and Mr. McDonald, because it also is like this question of legacy, and there's a good side that has control of the town and a bad side that's trying to wrestle control of the town. And part of what makes the good side good, I think, and this is like kind of seen, is the McDonald's. It's this father, and he has 3 sons and 1 daughter, and he has this family that he's going to pass the town down to his family, and they've been working on it for this whole time. It's their own blood, sweat, and tears. And then there's Ed Asner, who doesn't have a family, just buys hired guns, and that's
And like,
that's kind of
you definitely see this in even in like the later, like the 70s or 80s Clint Eastwood westerns as well. It's a constant theme even in the classic, and then like
and Shane,
as well. It's a classic theme about a skepticism of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, capitalism and like money and power, but it's distinctly American and kind of like Republican. It's big business is bad, but small business is the most virtuous thing you can be engaged in. It's like, it's the prospector, like the small farm, just like the cowboy. It's the family business that has ties to a community and has sort of like worked the land to hew out of it civilization, and like they are entitled to the fruits of that. Whereas then there's like the railroad baron, the cattle baron, like these oligarchs that just represent just wealth to buy a version of community for themselves or authority that is not their right because they haven't worked for it.
And yeah, that's something I noticed in Rio Bravo. I noticed a line that I like don't think I've ever heard before in the movie, like 4th time watching it because the subtitles were on. But when Stumpy is talking to the cheekboned, like baron type brother, he says they're in the jail cell, and Stumpy's like, "Yeah, I'll your brother's liable to get accidentally shot," and Stumpy's like, "Heck, I'll make sure of it," which is a great line. And
oh no, like there's another time where the brother behind bars, he was like, "If you do anything, this guy's crazy enough to kill me or shoot me or something," and somebody goes, "He's not as dumb as I thought he was."
Yeah, so good. And but the cheekbone brother is like, still some bad blood between us, I see. And Stumpy says, 460 acres might not seem like a heck of a lot to you, but it was to me. And it's like, oh, okay, so this guy must have like bought Stumpy's land out from under.
Yeah, bought him out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which is like an interesting little thing to just throw in there, one line.
And like, at least the cheekbone guy, at least he has a brother, but like Ed Asner in El Dorado is just a man alone. Like he doesn't even carry a gun, and John Wayne makes a point of, pointing that out to him at one point. But like, he is just a man alone with the people and power that he buys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like I said, El Dorado is a very similar plot. It's just like the lawman and drunk roles are just reversed. Mitchum starts out as the upright lawman, and Wayne is kind of the more of the gun for hire, a little bit more rough around the edges. But it's Wayne who becomes the lawman and has to save Robert Mitchum, who has become completely besotted by drink. It's Mississippi is the kid instead of Colorado. But like, yeah, it's basically like the plot happens about halfway through the movie when they arrest Ed Asner and put him in the jail. And then like that starts the clock on that pressure cooker scenario of like when they're going to break him out, how they're going to try to break him out, how they're going to stand up to all these hired guns, and then headed at this time by a guy who actually has a name. Like all the thugs in Rio Bravo like are not characters at all. But in this, you have the McLeod character who's like just like a slightly more amoral version of John Wayne in this movie. But they both, he's not evil. They just both, he's willing to work for evil people, and that's what separates him and John Wayne.
Yeah, he's more mercenary, and that's kind of the only difference, the only thing edging him out. He's more mercenary, and in a weird way, he has like this, like more honor for combat than John Wayne, because he's like, oh, I wanted to kind of face you down in a, an even, draw type scenario.
1v1, straight up.
Yeah. But it doesn't matter because he's like mercenary and more like less moral overall, therefore, because, John Wayne did do a bit of a dirty trick, but, it was for good in the end.
I mean, dude, you're being paid money to kill people. There's no such thing as fair or unfair. It's just,
exactly.
And that's what I love so much about the scene at the end between John Wayne and the McLeod character is the begrudging respect of not giving him a chance. Because that's really what it means to be that good. Is don't be dumb enough to give the other guy a chance.
Exactly. And it's like, it's John Wayne's experience kind of tells him that, because he always calls Mississippi green, like throughout the whole movie. He's like, he's green because he saves his life like twice within the first 5 minutes of meeting him, because he's just like, very impulsive and reckless and kind of a liability to the whole team until the very end of the movie, honestly.
Well, the thing I love about the Mississippi character is that he doesn't even use a gun. Like when we first meet him, he like stares down like 5 guys at a card table being like, I've killed 3 other guys. It's a classic, revenge mission because like they killed his father figure and he's been tracking them down for 3 years and you're the last one on my list. And McLeod's like, wait a second, he doesn't have a gun. I want to see how this plays out. I want to see how he gets the upper hand on a table full of guys with guns when he's unarmed. But no, he has a knife like down the collar of his shirt, which is a knife arrangement I've rarely seen ever in movies or elsewhere.
Yeah.
He's hiding a blade down like the back of the collar of his shirt, and he throws it. And he kills a guy with a knife. But then I also love when John Wayne sort of adopts Mississippi and sort of like mans him up a bit. He's like, we got to get you a gun. And he takes him to the Swede. And I love this because this is literally like, this is like Red Dead Redemption. This is just the video game where they're just like, hold on, before we go to the next mission, we have to upgrade your kit. We go to the gunsmith. And he gets him, he's like, what? Can you give me a gun for a guy who can't shoot? And he just gives him this fucking double barrel sawed off fucking but as a pistol that just like the spray on this thing is like a 30-yard radius. It's like 30-yard radius. Just gets peppered with fucking buckshot. And he still can't hit anyone with this thing. It's so funny.
He's still the only person he hits is John Wayne on accident. He wings him at one point. It's like, I also love that when he's like, has Mississippi and takes him out into the desert, and he's like, all right, let's see if you got what it takes to use a gun. And then he's like, all right, now draw and shoot that cactus. And then he shoots like a foot to the left of the cactus once. And he's like, all right, you're hopeless. He's like, all right, that's enough for that. We need to get you a big shotgun.
And, also, I really love in the, as I gleefully read into it, the homoerotic relationship between John Wayne and James Caan in this movie is that like after he takes some gun shopping, he's sort of like, James Caan changes outfits and like John Wayne just starts dressing him. And the first thing you see as they like when they get to the town of El Dorado is James Caan. Everyone's making fun of the stupid hat he wears throughout the whole movie because it's like his friend's hat, but it's not a proper cowboy hat. But the next scene you see with him after he like gets adopted by John Wayne, he's in like a skin tight leather shirt.
Yeah. He dresses in pure fetish gear, like from that, like for the rest of the movie. He's wearing like Gambit's hat from X-Men and then fetish, like leather fetish gear. It's so cool.
And there's another moment in Rio Bravo where the scene where Angie Dickinson throws the flower pot out of the window to give Ricky Nelson the distraction he needs to like shoot, throw John Wayne his rifle and shoot these 2 guys who had got the drop on him. And then, like, after he does that, he walks away, and there's this scene where John Wayne kind of turns around and looks at him as he goes and just starts grinning. He has this grin that goes up to, like, his ear, and he's just like, I'm liking what I'm seeing in this young cowpoke. I can't wait to break this hoss in.
Yeah, it's so cool.
Here's another detail that connects these 2 movies. Did you notice that, like, when we first see Robert Mitchum in El Dorado, and he's like rousting John Wayne out of his bed because he thinks he's been hired to like gun him down, he's carrying that repeating carbine rifle, and it's the same exact one that John Wayne has and walks around and carries it every second of Rio Bravo. And in El Dorado, John Wayne goes, something about that looks familiar. And Mitchum says to him, he goes, I have it set up in exactly the same way you used to. So it's this sort of like acknowledgement that connects these 2 movies that like that not just that they may take place in like the same universe, but they are like it's winking that they are the same movie. Like,
Yeah.
just Mitchum has taken the mantle of the rifle carrying lawman from John Wayne.
Yeah, exactly. It's incredible. I also I think like the one beat that really connects these movies, like I think like the one where I was like, oh, these are the same movie, was when there's a part in both movies where the drunk gets kind of laughed out of the evil saloon because it's a Western, so there's a good saloon in town that's cool. And then there's an evil one that's like shady, and that's where
And all
like,
the people
bad
there are
guys.
sadists and cruel.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. And they where like someone goes into the evil saloon, the drunk goes into the evil saloon, gets laughed at, and then leaves, and then they drive a bad guy, a would-be assassin, out of a barn, and he escapes into the bad guy saloon, and then the drunk character goes in, and no one takes him
Like,
seriously. and he
no
gets the
one
drop
came in
on him.
here. And then
Yeah.
in both movies, there's one guy in the bar who's like, no one came in here. What are you talking about? And then they both go, I'll remember you said that.
Yeah.
We'll
So
remember
cool.
you said that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, of course, when they like in Rio Bravo, he's like on the second floor. And Dean Martin, he shoots him, like turns around and shoots him from like, then he falls off the balcony. And then El Dorado, he's hiding behind the piano. And there's a great scene where the piano player, he keeps playing throughout all this tension, but he keeps playing worse and worse and worse.
Yeah,
And
it's so
Mitchum's
cool.
like, you're playing a lot of sour notes on that there piano. Would you like to stop? And he's like, yes. And then he just dives away and he just shoots the piano, and he shoots the guy through the piano. He's crouched
Yeah.
behind it.
It's so sick.
I would say like there's definitely more action in El Dorado. Like I think the shootout in the church is like a really good action
Yes.
scene. Like the
Such a sick
shootout in the
set
church
piece.
is awesome. Like where the guys are like they're sniping at them from the bell tower, and then like they just start shooting the bell so that they can like advance for like they cover, but the noise of that bell going off as rifle bullets hit it, and then they get in the church. It's like just a great Western shootout, which like El Dorado, Rio Bravo, that there's a couple shootouts, but there really is only one like big action set piece at the end with the dynamite. Whereas like Rio Bravo, it just expands the aperture. There's way more like there's in the beginning there's big scenes of like big open sky and like horses being corralled through a creek and
hundreds
just
of
like
horses.
sort
yeah.
of Western stuff, whereas Rio Bravo really is just it could be a play. It could
Yeah.
be like you could just like you could stage it as a play, like
Mm-hmm.
all the action in it without cutting really anything.
Yeah. Oh, we also got to talk about James Caan's the scene that brought a dead silence to the theater.
Oh my God!
When I saw it at the Museum of the
Yes.
Moving Image.
Yes, this is questionable. This movie was made in 1966. But
Yeah.
Hesse, you explain the James Caan scene, the yikes from me, dog.
Yeah, there's a scene where James Caan and James Caan, the older guy who has a bow and arrow because they're on a stealth mission. And there's a
Bow and
guy.
arrow is so clutch for stealth missions. So clutch.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a guy guarding the back door, and the older guy's like, it's James Caan, the old guy, and I think, is it Robert Mitchum or is it?
Yeah, it's
I forgot who
Mitchum
it
goes
is.
in the back with him. Yeah.
Yeah, and the old guy's like, all right, let me just draw back and let me just draw a bead on this guy and snipe him with my bow. And James Caan is like, wait, I just checked the
I
game
got a
manual.
better idea.
I just checked the game manual and he's going to scream if you do that. So hang on. I have a way better idea. And he just like goes over and puts on like a racist hitman disguise of a
He puts a flower pot on his head and like a
Yeah.
curtain, like a black curtain, like just over his shoulders.
yeah, and then he starts immediately talking in like mock Chinese.
Like pigeon Chinese,
Yeah.
like so Sali. Even
And
does the eyes
he
thing.
even does
Yeah.
the eye thing, which is so crazy. And he walks.
I love the idea of him walking up to the guy, pulling his eyes back, and just
Yeah.
going, "I am Chinese."
Yeah, and the guy's like, "Well, oh, hey there, fella. Sorry, but you can't come in here." It's like,
See, What's so funny about that scene, at least from like our modern perspective, is of course the hilarious racism. But even funnier than that is the idea that that would have worked on anyone.
Yeah. It
Like,
makes
I don't care how
no
fucking
sense.
drunk you are. The James Caan coming up to you with a flower pot in his head going, so sorry, be Chinese. And then you just be like, is this an Asian or what? I don't know what's going on here.
Yeah, it's so ridiculous. It's absolutely insane.
Maybe that's just how dumb. The thing is, like, there were a ton of Chinese people in the old Western times. It's like,
There's a
I don't
Chinese
care how
person
fucking
in
dumb they were back then. Like
in Rio Bravo. There's a Chinese
spotting
guy.
racial. Yeah, there is an actual Chinese guy who's like the town coroner.
Yeah.
And that was made in 1959, not 1966. They got worse in 1966.
I honestly, like, what if James Caan was like, I have an idea for this scene. I have this idea. I have this character I've been meaning to bust out. You know?
Yeah. So that was definitely a highlight of the movie. But I don't know. I don't have much more on either of these movies.
Yeah. I mean, you should definitely watch these movies. They're incredible. They're amazing.
I mean, this was our first foray into like the Western genre, which I'm glad we did, even as a bonus episode. I mean, because like, to me, it's like the Western, like, of that 40s and 50s, like the golden era of Hollywood. It really is like the genre of like the Western, the noir or gangster movie, and then like the screwball comedy, or like the distinctly American film genres that like we invented. Everyone else was influenced by it. Like midwife so much of the style that we take for granted today, but like particularly for American movies, like in those genres, it's really on the canvas on which we kind of like communicated our own sense of self and our sense of destiny of like what the 20th century would become.
Yeah, absolutely. And the personal journey of the American man and his quest to beat homosexuality and find a wife.
And you know what? It always works. It always works. And
it always works.
Despite being, associated with being like this culturally reactionary genre, like the classic Western for me, despite having certain reactionary archetypes or racist stereotypes of Chinese people or Mexican people, when it comes to his portrayal of the American masculinity, I think like people might hear that and you might think it's this like very kind of stern, I don't know, like Andrew Tate kind of thing, or at least compared to today. Today's conception of what it means to be a man is like the opposite of ever having fun with anyone, let alone your good man. It's just like there's just no fun. It is such a grim and brutal world, you might say, but it's so austere, and the portrayal of masculinity in these movies, while serious and traditional in certain senses, I think is like what it comes down to is just having fun with your friends and not being and getting over yourself, being an asshole and being selfish, so that you can continue to have fun with your friends.
Yeah, like modern masculinity is very, you have to be an ascetic monk without a religion, basically. You have to have
without
no
believing
fun.
in God, you have to deny yourself all the shit that people used to do. But at least there was some expectation of eternal reward. This is just sort of like, will people think I'm scary on the internet? Or like, will some imaginary woman want to have sex with me?
Yeah, and this is more like, it's you and your homies against the world, and you gotta keep the jail safe. And you got to protect what's yours, protect, the law and what you stand for and your values.
And then like, definitely drink, but like if it becomes too much of a problem, stick to beer. And I do like at the end of I like at the end of El Dorado,
yes,
Robert
exactly.
Mitchum just pours himself a nice glass of whiskey, but he's got the buttoned up shirt, so he's like, it's all
It's
okay
fine.
now. I can handle it. Yeah,
He's cured. He's cured.
Just one before bed at night. It's fine.
Yeah. So cool.
So that does it for this movie mindset episode. A little bit shorter than our normal ones, but fuck you. You didn't think you were getting anything today, so there you go. And stay tuned on Barbie and Oppenheimer. I have yet to see Barbie. I would really like to talk about those two movies because I think they really make a really interesting pairing, and I think they say a lot of interesting things about where movies are now. That there's just a lot to talk about there, but just hold your horses. Just be a little bit patient. like I said, gray area. We'll figure it out, but we don't want to step on anyone's toes.
If you are a guild official or on the board of SAG or WGA, please send us an official dispensation to do the episode.
If
Yeah.
you would like to hear us talk about Barbie and Oppenheimer,
I'm
but
gambling that one of you out there is on one of those boards.
Yeah, absolutely.
Put it on official letterhead, send it to us, we'll do the episode.
and also I'll use this opportunity to say I hope you enjoyed this bonus episode. But officially now, October 4th will be the reappearance of Movie Mindset in our Ghoul v Scream Set horror movie special 5-episode run for this spooky season. We're doing horror movies for you this Halloween. We're coming back on October 4th, but stay tuned. We may drop some bonus surprise episodes between now and then. So, that's it. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.